From the very beginning of my life, I always felt like a background character in my own home. My name is Ion, the eldest child of the family, yet I grew up invisible in the shadow of my younger sister, Sarah. Sarah was the golden child, the miracle daughter, the pride of my parents. From her earliest school days, she excelled in everything: grades, sports, friendships. Every achievement of hers was displayed like a trophy, while my efforts were brushed aside as if they never existed. I wasn't a failure by choice. Life just didn't deal me the same hand of luck. Where Sarah breezed through life, doors seemed to slam shut in my face. After high school, I enrolled in college with dreams of starting my own business one day, but reality hit hard. I had to drop out when my part-time jobs couldn't cover tuition. Instead of encouragement, I received mockery. "Why can't you be more like your sister?" My mother would say, her words sharp as knives. "You always have excuses, Ion," my father would add, his tone full of disappointment. And then there was Sarah, with her smug little smile, always reminding me of my shortcomings. "Don't take it personally, she would say, "not everyone is cut out for success." The worst part wasn't her words, it was the laughter that followed. My parents laughed with her, my own family found amusement in my pain. Every family gathering became a stage where I was the punchline. While Sarah talked about her new achievements, winning competitions, securing internships, and later on, her successful corporate career, I sat quietly in the corner, nursing my dignity like a fragile wound. If I tried to share something, anything, it was dismissed. One night still haunts me. We were sitting at the dinner table, just the four of us. Sarah had just come home after receiving an award at her company. She wore a shimmering dress, her trophy gleaming in her hand. She placed it on the table like a queen presenting her crown. "Look, Mama, Baba," she said proudly, Employee of the Year. My parents clapped, beaming with pride. My mother even teared up. "Mashallah, Beta, you've made us so proud," she gushed. Then, as if it were rehearsed, Sarah tilted her head at me and said, "What about you, Bai? What did you achieve this year?" The air froze. I stared at my plate, wishing it would swallow me whole. I've been working hard at the shop," I muttered. Her lips curled into that cruel smile. "Working hard or hardly working? Come on, Bai, you're almost 30 and still stuck in odd jobs. You're a failure compared to me." And then it came the laughter. My parents laughed. My father slapped the table as if it were the funniest joke he had ever heard. My mother shook her head with a smile, as though Sarah's insult was harmless banter. But it wasn't harmless. It cut deep. That night I locked myself in my room and stared at the ceiling for hours. I questioned my worth, my existence. How could the people who were supposed to love me the most take joy in my humiliation? I wasn't angry at Sarah. She was spoiled, raised to believe she was better. I was angry at my parents, their silence when I needed them, their laughter when I was torn apart, their betrayal. It burned inside me. I realized something important that night. To them, I was invisible unless I was a failure. From that day forward, I stopped trying to win their approval. I stopped explaining myself. I stopped defending my worth. If they could not see me beyond my failures, then they didn't deserve to see the fire I was quietly building inside. But deep down, a silent vow was forming in my heart. One day I promised myself I would rise not for their applause, not for Sarah's acknowledgement, but for me. And when that day came, their laughter would turn into silence, and silence, I knew, would be the sweetest revenge. Months passed, and I lived like a shadow in my own family. Sarah, as always, shined brighter than the sun in my parents' eyes. My failures had become their favorite story to tell relatives, and I had become numb. Then came the evening that changed everything. Sarah had recently married Camel, a wealthy businessman who owned several companies. Their wedding was extravagant, something out of a magazine. I wasn't surprised when my parents gushed about their perfect son-in-law to anyone who would listen. Camel was polite, charming, and carried himself with the quiet confidence of a man who didn't need to prove anything. One weekend, Sarah invited the whole family to dinner at her mansion. Her house was enormous, gleaming marble floors, chandeliers dripping with crystals, servants gliding silently in the background. The kind of place that reminded me of everything I didn't have. The table was covered in dishes I couldn't even pronounce. Everyone was dressed elegantly, while I wore my one decent suit, the same one I had worn to weddings and interviews. At first, the evening went smoothly. Sarah flaunted her wealth like a queen, showing off her kingdom. She gave us a tour of the house, pointing out the imported furniture and limited edition art pieces, making sure we noticed every detail. My parents followed her like admiring fans, their eyes glowing with pride. And then, as always, the spotlight turned to me. "So bye," Sarah said, sipping her wine as she leaned back in her chair. "What have you been up to these days? Still running around odd jobs?" Her tone dripped with sarcasm. I felt the familiar tightening in my chest, but I tried to stay calm. "I've been working on something," I said softly. "Something," she repeated, raising an eyebrow. "That sounds vague, or maybe it's just another way of saying nothing." My parents chuckled. My father shook his head and sighed dramatically. "Ion, learn from your sister. Look at the life she's built. You're older, yet you've achieved nothing. Honestly, we worry about you." The laughter returned low, cruel, and heavy. I sat there, heat rising to my face, my fists clenched under the table. I wanted to scream, to ask why my failures entertained them, but the words stuck in my throat. Sarah wasn't done. She leaned forward, her voice laced with poison. "Bye, do you know what the difference between you and me is? I make money while you make excuses. You're a failure and everyone knows it." Her words hit like bullets, and then it happened. My parents laughed, loudly, as if their daughter's insult was the highlight of the night. For a moment, I felt like I couldn't breathe. The betrayal cut deeper than ever. This wasn't just a joke anymore. It was cruelty dressed as family love. But before I could drown in humiliation, an unexpected voice broke the silence. "Enough, Sarah." It was Camel. His voice was calm, but it carried a weight that silenced the room. All eyes turned to him. Sarah frowned. "What, you were just insulting your brother," Camel interrupted, his eyes sharp, "and your parents are laughing at it as if it's entertainment. That's not how you treat family." The laughter died instantly. My parents looked startled, their smiles fading. Camel continued, his tone firm but respectful. "Success isn't measured by how much money you have or how big your house is. It's measured by character, resilience, and how you treat people. Ion has more dignity sitting here quietly than you." All have mocking him. The words hung heavy in the air. Sarah's face turned red with embarrassment. My parents shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I didn't know what to say. For the first time in my life, someone had stood up for me. Not my parents, not my sister, but an outsider, the man they idolized. My chest ached, not with humiliation, but with something new. Hope. That night, as I left Sarah's mansion, Camel caught up with me. He placed a hand on my shoulder and said quietly, "Don't let their words define you, Ion. I see potential in you. You just need to believe it yourself." For the first time in years, I felt seen. Truly seen, and as I walked away from that glittering house, I knew something inside me had shifted. I was no longer just the invisible sun. I was a man who would rise, silently, steadily, and one day, the same people who laughed at me would have no choice but to swallow their pride. That day would come, and when it did, it would be my sweetest revenge after that dinner. I couldn't sleep for nights. Camel's words echoed in my head. "Don't let their words define you, Ion. I see potential in you." No one had ever said that to me before. My parents had never spoken those words. Sarah had never believed in me. But Camel, a man who barely knew me, saw something that even I had forgotten existed. It was strange. Shame and hope lived inside me at the same time. Shame for being humiliated again, and hope because maybe, just maybe, I wasn't destined to be a failure after all. That night, I made a silent decision. I would no longer live in the shadow of their laughter. The quiet struggle by day. I worked my ordinary job at a local electronics shop, repairing phones and laptops. Customers barely noticed me, and my parents still mocked me, thinking I was wasting my life. But by night, I lived a different life. Long after everyone was asleep, I sat hunched over my second-hand laptop, teaching myself skills coding, digital marketing, business management. I watched tutorials, read articles, and studied case studies of successful startups. I didn't have money, but I had time. And I poured every drop of my time into learning. Some nights I fell asleep on my desk, my neck aching, my eyes burning from staring at the screen. But I kept going. Whenever my parents laughed at me again, whenever Sarah called me a failure, I stored that pain like fuel. Every insult became a spark. Every laugh became a push forward. They thought I was doing nothing, but in silence I was building something. An unexpected ally one evening, Camel called me. "I know you've been working late," he said casually. My heart skipped a beat. How did he know? He chuckled. "I can see it in your eyes, Ion. You're tired, but it's not the kind of tired that comes from giving up. It's the tired of a man who's working towards something." I didn't know what to say. For the first time, I opened up. I told him about my dream of starting a small online business, about how I wanted to create something that was mine, something that proved I wasn't a failure. Camel listened without judgment, and then he said something I'll never forget. "Ion, I'll help you, not because you're Sarah's brother, but because I believe in people who refuse to give up. Send me your business plan. I want to see what you're working on." That night, my hands trembled as I typed everything I had envisioned. I sent him my notes, my ideas, my research. I expected him to laugh like my parents did, but instead he called back the next day. "This has potential," he said firmly. "It needs refining, but I'm willing to invest in you." I felt tears sting my eyes. Nobody had ever invested in me, not their money, not even their faith. But Camel did. The birth of a dream with Camel's guidance and a small investment. I started my online business, repair services, and selling refurbished electronics. At first, it was slow. Orders trickled in, problems piled up, and there were nights I wanted to quit. But then I remembered Sarah's cruel smile, my parents' laughter, and my promise to myself, and I pushed harder. Week by week, month by month, the business grew. More customers, more revenue. I reinvested everything back into expanding. Slowly, what was once a dream on paper began turning into reality. Nobody knew, not my parents, not Sarah. To them, I was still the failure son, working at a shop. They had no idea that behind the curtains, I was rising. And perhaps that was my greatest strength, my silence. Because one day, when I finally revealed what I had built, their laughter would die in their throats. The fire within sometimes, late at night, I looked at myself in the mirror. I saw the same face, the same tired eyes, but behind them was something new. Fire, for the first time in my life, I believed in myself. Not because of my parents, not because of Sarah, but because of me. And because of one man who reminded me that dignity mattered more than money. My family had no idea what was coming. And the thought of their shock, their silence, their regret, it kept me going. The revenge I wanted wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was simple. To succeed in silence and let my success make the noise they could never ignore. 2 years, that's how long I lived in silence, building piece by piece what everyone thought was impossible for me. 2 years of hidden sacrifices, sleepless nights, and moments of self-doubt that I crushed with memories of their laughter. And then, one day, it happened. My business exploded. What began as a small online service turned into a thriving company. We expanded into multiple cities, gained partnerships, and built a reputation for honesty and quality. For the first time in my life, I wasn't just surviving. I was succeeding. I moved into my own apartment, bought a car, hired employees who now depended on me for their livelihoods, and all the while, my family remained unaware. To them, I was still the shop boy, The invitation, it was Sarah, ironically, who set the stage for my moment. She invited us all for a grand family dinner, again at her mansion. Camel has achieved a new business milestone. She boasted over the phone. "We're celebrating. You should come by. Maybe you'll get inspired." Her words carried the same old sting, but I smiled quietly. This time, the tables were about to turn. I arrived wearing a tailored suit. Not the war. Not one I used to repeat at every occasion. My watch, my shoes, everything about me spoke of change, but not arrogance. I carried myself calmly, not needing to announce anything. When I walked in, my parents looked me over and frowned slightly. New clothes? My mother asked, surprised. Sarah smirked. "Wow, did you finally save enough from your shop job?" Their laughter began again. But this time it didn't hurt, because I knew something they didn't. The reveal during dinner, Sarah and my parents praised Camel endlessly. He accepted it with grace, but then he turned to me with a knowing smile. "Ayan," he said loudly, "why don't you share your recent achievement with everyone?" The room went silent. My heart thudded, but I remained calm. I pulled out my phone and projected a slideshow onto the screen behind us. Photos of my offices, my employees, my company logo. "This," I said evenly, "is my business. I started it from scratch 2 years ago. We've recently crossed a revenue milestone of millions." The silence that followed was deafening. My parents stared at the screen, their jaws slack. Sarah blinked rapidly, her smirk wiped clean off her face. For once, there was no laughter, only shock. I continued, my voice steady but laced with emotion. "You called me a failure. You laughed at me. But every insult, every time you made me feel small, became the reason I worked harder. I didn't succeed for your approval. I succeeded for myself." The shift, my father cleared his throat, trying to recover. "Ayan, we didn't know. You didn't care to know." I interrupted softly. "And that's the difference. You saw me as invisible until you could mock me. But today, I stand here not to rub it in your faces, but to show you that no one stays a failure forever." Sarah looked down, her face pale. For the first time, she had no words. Camel placed a hand on my shoulder and smiled. "I told you, Ayan, character is worth more than money. And today, you've proven it." The sweet revenge as I looked around the table. I felt something unexpected. I thought I would feel triumph, maybe even bitterness, but instead, I felt peace. My revenge wasn't loud or cruel. It wasn't about mocking them back. It was about showing them I could rise, even when they tried to bury me under their laughter. I forgave them silently, not because they deserved it, but because I deserved peace. From that day forward, my parents treated me differently. Respect replaced mockery. Silence replaced laughter. Sarah never called me a failure again. In fact, she avoided the word altogether. But the truth is, I didn't need their respect anymore. I had built my own. The redefined respect. As I left their mansion that night, I looked up at the sky and smiled. I wasn't the invisible son anymore. I was a man who had carved his identity out of betrayal, humiliation, and pain. And the sweetest revenge was not their apology, nor their regret. It was my success. It was my peace. It was the silence where their laughter used to be. And in that silence, I finally found myself.